Welcome to the Fantasy Baseball Beat, part of the Pitcher List Podcast Network. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Torres. I'll be your host today, joined as always by Mike Carter and Dave Funnel. We also have a special guest today, Nathan Grimm of Baseball Prospectus will be joining us. But before we bring him in, let's check in with Mike and Dave. And here's my opening question. In your opinion, what is the most actionable information that has come out of this first week of spring training? Mike, let's start with you.
Well, I'm going to go down south to Atlanta and talk about Spencer Strider. Last weekend, I was at Glarf drafting in Detroit Rock City, which was a great time. And you guys were helping me with some of my picks, places where I was having several thoughts and got stuck in a few places. And I was able to get Strider in the 10th round as my number 3 starter. But the piece of information that I found really exciting about that a day after I drafted him was that he's throwing curveballs and mixing in some other pitches. And so to me, that always seems like it's a good sign that maybe he's not as far away as what people had suggested earlier on. And now they're talking that with some luck, which I don't usually have a lot of, as we all know, he might be actually in the big league roster by the end of April, early May, which to me, if he comes back at that time, that's actionable for people that are drafting now because you should probably bump him up a little bit. That's a guy that can easily return a much higher value, in my opinion, with that news, if in fact he is healthy.
All right. So for you, it's Spencer Strider. And we'll be talking about your Glarf draft in a little bit here. Dave, I know you, for your actionable information, you're going to stay in Atlanta as well.
Yeah, for me, it's Ronald Acuna and the interview that he did. I think it was a huge piece of news that he said, he's going to take it easy on the base paths this year. I kind of figured that he would because earlier in the offseason, he said that he was going to, he never felt the same the last time he did it. He felt like he was rushed back and that this time he was going to take it easy and slowly make his way back. So it's a second ACL tear. He says he's going to take things slowly. He's not going to be in any Grapefruit League games. He might be in some scrimmages, but for me, that's very actionable. I think we can see exactly, we can get a better gauge of where we should be drafting him. And I think it's still way too early where he's going. I'd be pushing him down draft boards even more.
All right. Yeah, we talked about that, I think, last week, and I'm definitely with you on that, Dave. For me, it's I texted you guys about this earlier today, and I told you, save a spot at the end of your TGFBI drafts for Ben Rice. The Giancarlo Stanton injury sounds ominous, right? We don't know. I mean, it sounds like it's at least going to be a couple months, and there's some kind of personal issue going on that we really don't know about. I mean, it could be even longer than that he's out. And I think the market's not really acting or reacting very quickly to the Ben Rice news. I still see he's going in like the 450 to 500 range in drafts. And I think he's got to be pushed up because I think he'll at least have a strong side platoon role as a DH. And there's also a possibility that he's even the backup catcher. So if he gains catcher eligibility, there's just a lot of ways in which that pick could really pay off. And I think the skills that we saw last year, even though the results weren't great, the skills indicated that he is someone that has a lot of potential. I could see as a 20 to 25 home run bat hitting in the middle of that lineup. So, all right, guys, good stuff. So let's get to it. Let's bring in our guest. Again, we have Nathan Grimm of Baseball Prospectus here with us. He is also, there's this cool new tool that someone created for to rank NFBC players. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's in the 77th percentile of NFBC players, which is pretty cool. I think he's also, I'd put him in about the 94th percentile of just being a human being. He's not quite upper 90s, but I'd say a solid 94. He's also a personal friend of mine who has had the absolute delight of co-managing a few teams with me over the past few years. So Nathan, thanks for joining us, bud. How's it going?
I'm good, man. Delight is certainly a word that you could use to describe co-owning a team with you.
Well, we could save that for the end if you want to actually describe for people what it's like pairing with somebody who bullies you into making certain picks. We can save some time at the end.
Sounds great for the mental health minute.
Yes.
Nathan's mental health dwindles because of Torres. Yeah.
Right. Maybe for his mental health, he's going to do less teams with me going forward.
Yeah, last time I was on this podcast, I talked about how I had started talk therapy shortly before that. And actually now all of our sessions are just about co-owning teams with Chris. It's we the whole hour is just talking and why, and it's like, why did he do that? And then the right. therapist helps me talk through, why he made this decision to start a guy who's got a two-step, over a better pitcher. So it's it's been really helpful, but yeah, very expensive habit.
Yeah, wake up screaming JP Sears in the middle of the night. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Listen, when we win the overall with our DC team this year, that will cover at least half of your therapy bills. So take solace in that.
Yeah, when Brady Basso is locking it up in the last weekend, I'll thank you for forcing that 50th round pick on me.
Yeah. Well, listen, man. The alternative was some guy who I'm not even convinced is a real player named Doug Nikhazy, who you were really touting. Listen, that's a whole. We could spend a lot of time just bashing each other for the picks we made throughout that draft. But anyway, we have to talk about one player in particular that you and I talk pretty much every day, and one of the players that we have been going back and forth on and giving each other crap about is Colt Keith. You are in love with this guy, and I just don't see it. So I want to start right there. Let's get this out in the open. I feel like if we didn't do this now, it would kind of be looming over the rest of the podcast. So I just want to
address. Yeah. It'd be the elephant in the room.
Exactly. So why do you love him?
We need to qualify it, right? Like, I love the player at the price, which is what fantasy baseball kind of is in a nutshell, right? It's like, oh, really? I like this. Yeah.
No, thank you for explaining.
Stick around. I'll tell you some more secrets about how to play fantasy baseball well. It's a guy who spent all year in the majors and held his own, hit in like the 260s as a rookie, who was in, he was in the top 25 of basically every prospect list heading into last year. And this is really kind of where we, a lot of times are on the other side of discussions is, I like to factor in pedigree into thinking about players, whereas you much more prefer to weigh their major league sample size if it's noteworthy. And I like to try to kind of, it's narrative street. Like, I love to take a walk down narrative street and tell myself a story, how a guy might be better than what he was a year ago or what we're expecting him to be. And so it's really easy for me to tell myself a story about a 24-year-old former top prospect who was not, overmatched in his first year in the majors, and I can get him at pick 240 in every draft. I'm all about that. And I will, if it's 16 homers and a 260 average again, I feel like that plays at that price. And I think that there's actual upside there. So that's just why I land on him pretty much all the time in drafts so far, is because that's just, I love that. I'm sign me up for that kind of, as much as we can call it a floor, for that kind of floor, while also having a ceiling too.
See, that's the thing. I don't really agree with you on the ceiling aspect. I could get behind the floor argument, right? Like, the average is probably pretty safe. He's projected to be around a 255, 260 hitter. Okay, fine. But I guess at that point in the draft, I am still looking for upside. And to me, given the skills he showed last year, I understand that when he was coming up through the minors, that he showed power, and prospect people thought that he was going to have that in the majors. But if I look at the metrics from last year, there is nothing indicating that that's like imminent, right? That all of a sudden there is going to be this big jump in power. I mean, his hard hit rate was below average, 27.9 according to Fangraphs last year. not even a 6% barrel rate. There's a little bit of speed. He's probably going to get you maybe 7 to 8 stolen bases. So I think my perspective is that you're just kind of, it's a floor pick. And at pick 250, I'm looking for, for example, like I'd rather take a Drew Rasmussen or a Kumar Rocker. I'm just putting those out as examples. Like to me, like I can find a guy like a Colt Keith, in my opinion, like in the 300s. And you're right, we do differ in terms of how I don't really follow the prospect stuff as much as you do. So maybe that's a gap in my game, I'll admit. But like I'm not really factoring that in. Like the first thing that I'm going to look at is if there, like you said, it is enough of a sample size. What did those underlying metrics look like? So one example I could think of is like Tyler Stevenson, right? Like for years we were like, oh, Tyler Stevenson, he had like a 70 grade power, when he first was coming up through the minors, but like nothing in his profile showed that was coming, right? At least imminently. We've seen a little bit more now, but I guess that's where we differ. And I'm not saying, as much as I bust your chops, I don't know, man. Like you might be victory lapping this one at the end of the year, but that's my perspective on it. I'm curious to get your guys' opinion, Mike and Dave, on this player specifically, as well as the idea of, how much do you factor in a player's prospect pedigree when doing, like an evaluation for a redraft league?
For me, I like Colt Keith. I like the fact that he's going to take the first base job, and I do look at their prospect pedigree. I like to see what they've done in the past, and I like to see what they can maybe strive to be. I get what you're saying about looking at the underlying skills, but I also know that like just coming up, they're not going to succeed right away. They're not going to, be the superstar that, we all think he might be. But I do think that not all growth is linear. And I think that he has a chance with consistent playing time that I think he could grow into the player that he was in the minor leagues, which did show some power. So I'm in on him at that price, and I'd be willing to give him a shot this year.
Okay. Mike, this may be a little bit of a leading question, but do you have any concerns, as I do with Keith, around the park, as well as maybe not getting full-time at bats against lefties, or like where do you stand on that? And just him.
Yeah, he's an interesting player to me because in my Glarf draft, which was the first real draft I've done all year, that was last weekend. Lauren Auerbach, who lives on the Great Lake of Washington, D.C., took him in the 16th round as her starting second baseman. And I think was a really good spot for him. I love the fact that he's adding in another position of eligibility. I do have a little bit of concern about the playing time and how the at-bats are going to shake out in Detroit. It seems like they could have a situation, I'm not saying they will, but they could have a situation of some logjam there, and he's going to have to hit to do well. I like what Nathan said, though. This is a guy that really quietly put together 550 at-bats last year, got a lot of experience, learned some things. And we really know that, you get into that 800, 900 at-bat range, and you start to see what a player really is. And Dave said the growth is not linear. I do think that there's a possibility for some growth stock there. Other guys that go around that same spot seem to be like Jonathan India, Brandon Lau, who I know is Dave's guy, Gleyber Torres. I'd rather have Gleyber Torres for sure, I would say, just because I think that there is some pedigree prospect there. I don't get as bogged down in the pedigree prospect as a lot of other people do. I probably should get bogged down in it more. Mm-hmm. I don't pay as much of attention to it as I probably should.
Okay. All right, enough Colt Keith talk. I will take the big fat L. We'll come up with something, Nathan. Like I will do something embarrassing, or I don't know, buy a Colt Keith shirt, something, if he goes on and breaks out this year. What I will not concede to, as there's a 0% chance that your boy Vaughn Grissom becomes a thing this year. Okay, so let's just we've gone back and forth on that one as well. Let's just put that to bed. It ain't happening, bro.
Okay. All right. We'll see.
All right. So let's go on to our next segment, and we're gonna call this segment "Why Did You Make That Pick?" So this is going to be the majority of today's episode. We're going to be critiquing a few of our recent drafts. So I think we're going to have time to look at Mike's Glarf draft as well as Nathan's Slarf draft. These names, man, are killing me.
Not great.
Not great. I mean, I get the acronym, but it just doesn't. It's there's
Barf was fun. Everything else,
fun.
Yeah. Right.
The other one's not so much. But we're going to be taking a look at those and questioning each other's player selections, roster construction, as well as doing like an overall risk assessment, which we're going to rely on Dave for that, since that's his area of expertise, looking at the injuries and some of the risk that we're taking on. Listen, we're going to be a little hard on each other. We're not just going to sit here and tell each other how great our drafts look, because there's really not much to be learned from doing that.
Wait a minute.
Oh, trust me, we're going to rip yours to shreds.
Wait a minute. On Saturday, I shared your message with other people in Glarf when you said that my team would quote unquote feed families. Not just one family, not just my family,
multiple families,
but feed families. And now what I'd like to point out to the listeners is what's happened subsequently has been a systematic ripping of picks at 6 o'clock in the morning. Why did you do that? I'm like, hey, wait a minute. You were helping me do this. Now,
actually, yeah, I was involved in the process with some of these, not all of them.
No, I know. I'm just giving you a hard time.
Yeah, but no, I do like your team, but for the purposes of today,
but now you're saying negative. It doesn't. Now you're saying it doesn't feed any families.
Well, you can feed families at the dollar store.
At the dollar store.
Yeah.
It's a bag of Funyuns for you. Yeah, there you go.
That's right. Ramen noodles. That's it. So yeah, anyway, we're going to look at it through a very critical lens. Hopefully the listeners learn something, we learn something, and I think it's good to just challenge each other and be forced to defend our decisions. We're hoping that the listeners, that you guys will get a lot of good player takes out of this, as well as some considerations in terms of draft strategy that are going to help you as you prepare for your upcoming drafts. So the drafts that we're looking at are all 15 teamers, rotisserie style. So if you have questions about other formats, points leagues, keepers, all of that good stuff, I know people have been messaging our Twitter handle, and that's great. Keep doing that. You could send those questions to our show at fantasy, the letter B, beat. And we will, at some point, we will definitely respond. I've been trying to keep up with that. So let's start by looking at Mike's Glarf draft.
Can I stop you here? I know this isn't my show, but I was told, and when you invited me on, I was told that the theme was going to be a roast. And so I know that maybe the roast theme has gone by the wayside, but I did prepare some material for all three of you, because I thought it was going to be a roast. So could I just fire off these roast jokes before we get started?
You know what? Just let it rip, baby.
All right. I'm gonna. It's all prepared here. I'm just gonna read straight from it, and I'm not gonna hold back, guys. So, all right. So I'm gonna present this like I'm standing at a lectern. Yeah. Oh, so Mike Carter's here tonight. Mike's a smart guy, but he's a glutton for punishment. He's a White Sox fan. He writes about bullpens, and in his real life, he's a public educator. The last time I saw someone get this much pleasure from their own pain, I had to delete my browsing history afterwards.
Wow.
All right.
I give that like an 8. That was really good.
I like that. Yeah. That is my life in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Mike thinks this is a roast, but it's actually an intervention. Mike, will you accept the help that's being offered here today? We've got a van outside waiting to take you to Wrigley Field, where you can watch a good team play baseball. Please accept the help that's being offered to you.
Yeah, as long as I don't have to go to work tomorrow morning, I'll go anywhere you guys want me to go. That's
good. And Dave Funnel is here tonight as well, or at least I'm told Dave is here tonight. I haven't actually seen him or done any reporting of my own on the subject, but someone tweeted that he's here, and I quote tweeted it with some eyeball emojis. I kid, but Dave is actually very good at what he does. He's like the injury guy. In fact, I've heard some people take to calling him Dr. Dave. It's a fun nickname. No negative connotations or snickering whatsoever.
No.
And finally, we come to the man of the hour, Chris Torres. I made you the center of the roast, of course.
Of course.
What's there to say about Chris that hasn't already been said about the cast of Jersey Shore? Perfectly manicured facial hair, takes incredibly long showers, loves to tell you his opinion. Wait. That's not fair. They were Italians from New Jersey, and Chris is a Puerto Rican from New York. At least they came by it, honestly.
All right.
It sounds like I don't like Chris. So let's set the record straight. I love Chris. I'm one of his biggest supporters. And by that, I mean I support him financially by paying for half of a fantasy team that he then drafts without considering my opinions.
This is too good. This is too good.
Chris famously said on this podcast that he tapes his mouth shut when he sleeps. I'm sure I speak for a lot of listeners when I say, maybe just leave that tape on when you're awake too, bro.
Wow.
In all sincerity, Chris is...
Okay,
what?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go on.
I'll say, just go ahead. Finish it up.
In all sincerity, Chris is one of my favorite people in the world. And he's not even the second nicest host on this podcast, which is a testament to all three of you. Thank you guys for having me. This was fun, and now I have to go. I wasn't sure if I was going to deliver that at the beginning or end, so I just, or whether you guys would continue having me on after I roasted you.
I don't know. We'll have to take a quick break and decide whether we're going to continue with this. Wow, man, that was really good. You're like the Jeff Ross of fantasy baseball. Like you are the roast master.
I'm available to come on people's podcasts and roast them. Sure.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna have to release this, and I think get you some more invites to just roast all the podcasts.
That was great.
Yeah. All right, now that we got that out of the way, actually, you know what? Let's take a quick commercial break. All right, we are back. Let's move on to Mike's Glarf draft, which
this is gonna be really fun.
Yeah, which he did this past weekend up in Detroit at Comerica Park, which was really freaking cool.
Unbelievable, like, you guys! It was such a great experience. Oh my god,
awesome, man! Like, shout out to Dave. Like, he's built something really cool with all these drafts.
Well, Aaron Cumming and Marty Tallman were the guys who hosted the weekend, and they were above and beyond any of our expectations for what happened that weekend. It was terrific.
Yeah. No, it looked awesome. All right. So again, as I mentioned before, this is a 15-team league, 30 rounds, redraft with weekly fab. So let's start out, Mike. Tell us, which pick did you have, and what was your overarching strategy or plan heading into it?
Well, I had the 9th pick overall, and I had run through that with you guys in the days prior. And as I was driving the 5 hours to Detroit, I was running ideas past you guys. But with the 9th pick, I had kind of settled that I was going to go for Mookie Betts, and he did fall to me at that spot. And my thought process really was, I was hoping against hope that somehow I would be able to get Betts and either Francisco Lindor or Jackson Merrill to fall back to me in the second round. Neither one of those things happened. At that point, I decided to pivot. Instead of taking Austin Riley or Trey Turner, Jazz Chisholm, somebody like that, I took Zach Wheeler because my concern was I was worried that where I was picking in the draft that I might not get that ace quality guy that I kind of wanted to start my team with, So it went Skeens and Skubal at the end of the first round. And then when I got back to me, I took Wheeler. I'm glad that I did, because then after that, Matty Wood took Josh Hader off the board and with his pick in the second round, which was a little surprising, but fit his overall strategy. And then went Crochet, Gilbert, Burns, Snell, Edwin Diaz before it got back to me again. I did not want, and I know you guys, and I'm open to criticism on this. I did not want to have Blake Snell or Dylan Cease as my ace. I know many people are really comfortable with that. It made me feel a little leery and a little like ill at will. I really thought taking Wheeler there for me was my best choice, even though it wasn't the choice that I thought I was going to have. But welcome to fantasy baseball, right? Your best laid plans can go to hell in a handbasket in 5 minutes. And that's exactly what happened. Merrill went Churio had gone earlier in that pick. We had 4 outfielders go in a row starting the second round. So we had by the middle of the second round, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shortstops off the board, and we already had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 outfielders off the board by the time I made my second pick. So I decided to pivot there and went with Wheeler, for better or for worse.
All right, I have to get to your third round pick. Okay. So I was not involved in this one.
I own this one.
Let's put that out there. You went in round 3, Rafael Devers. And my first thought when I saw that you did that, I just remember putting down my phone. I'm like, what is this guy thinking? Like, I have no investment in it. I don't know. I got very emotionally invested in your draft for some reason. So Devers, like, all of the news around Devers has been negative this offseason, right? The shoulders at the end of last season were an issue, both of them, right? He said they were sore, whatever. And that was still the case at the beginning of spring training. Then there was the Bregman signing, right? And he wasn't happy about potentially moving off of third base. Now it looks like he's going to stick there, but like, there's just bad vibes all around. I have zero. I haven't even considered Devers at any point. Give me the thought process on Devers in the third round.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair criticism. I mean, Ramirez, Riley, and Machado were the first 3 off the board, and that's obviously pretty identifiable and easy to see. That was in the middle of a pitcher run in that round, and I already had Wheeler, and so I really wanted to make sure that I got a hitter there. And I'll tell you the truth, as I looked at the third base pool a little bit more deeply, I thought, geez, if I waited longer, and I could have there, you're absolutely right. I wasn't super in love with what was coming next, although there is some depth at the position. There was just some things that concerned me. I'm not a big Mark Vientos guy. I kind of want to see Junior Caminero do it first before I invest in him. And I just always feel like Devers, when he's healthy, even when he's not healthy, is going to put up pretty good numbers at a position where I've got some scarcity. Now, the issue with him, obviously, is, he does have some shoulder injuries. The beginning of the spring, they said that wasn't going to be an issue and that he was going to play third base. Obviously, we have the news of Bregman signing there. There's a lot of unknown there. Could Devers actually end up being a guy that gets traded? Probably not. Could you shift over to first base? Yes. And I'll tell you the truth, that thought process was really kind of front and center in my mind, because I thought Bregman's a way better third baseman than he is, which everybody knows. And if the Red Sox do something like trade Yoshida or somehow move Casas for a pitcher or whatever, and Devers ends up playing first base, I love the idea of him being there to kind of negate some of the wear and tear on those shoulders. I thought it was a little bit of a reach at the time too. I did select him probably half a round higher than anybody would in the league would have. So I stand by it. I think it was a good pick for me, but if I had to do it over again, I don't know. Maybe I would have gone outfielder there instead, or maybe gone for another shortstop, which had originally been my plan, and I kind of abandoned it quickly.
All right, Nathan, given the roast you just gave us, I know you're not going to hold back. Tell me what you think is the worst pick that you see on Mike's board.
Oh, this is kind of lame because, well, okay, I didn't love the Robert Suarez pick just because I'm worried
very
about
fair.
Suarez.
Very fair.
This is a really like sort of deep cut, but I just don't understand the Benintendi pick. And I know that it's like the 20 whatever, like 5th round, but I mean, he's a reserve outfielder. You've already got 5 outfielders. And so why not just take a swing for the fences with a guy who's a reserve a month out from the season instead of taking Benintendi, who's just as boring as it gets.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a really fair criticism. I mean, at that point, I really wanted to make sure this year, and I don't know how I did on that. You guys could probably give me some feedback on that. I almost always have a weak outfield in the 15 teamers. And I really wanted to make sure this year that I had some guys that I thought were going to give me some upside. I ended up with James Wood, Riley Green, Pete Crow Armstrong, who I thought give you a little bit of that upside. You know, there's some things there that I really like that all three of those guys do. And then I kind of went for the boring pick in 15 with Cedric Mullins. And then again in 18, I went with Jordan Walker because I feel like, you know, maybe he's got some upside. Maybe he kind of quietly figures it out this year. We don't know. So Benintendi to me was a guy that I got as bench depth in case one of those guys were injured or, you know, something of that nature. And Benintendi really, you know, I'm a Sox fan for better or for worse, usually for worse. And he had a really nice second half last year. You know, he had 124 WRC plus in the second half last year when he really kind of sold out for power. So the way that I was looking at it was maybe he bounces back to 260, hits 20 home runs. You know, he's going to hit towards the top of the order. The Sox would love to trade him, but I don't think they're going to be able to trade him with the contract that he has. So he's going to play the way that I kind of looked at it. So yes, very boring, unsexy pick. Could I have gone for somebody there that had more upside? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were other guys that went later on that I was like, ooh, that might have been a better pick, right? You know, a guy like
but who did I tell you to take that you didn't take?
I don't remember. There was a lot of people probably.
I said save a spot for Chandler Simpson because if he gets that job or if he makes the team out of camp, he's going to be a huge fat bid.
Yeah, so. Yeah, I should have. And then the next round I took MJ Melendez because I know that Dave's got a huge man crush on him. And
yeah, I see Dave getting aroused just when you said that.
I need a minute.
Take it easy over there, Dave.
I just wanted to make sure that I balanced off with a little bit of boring because I felt like I had some guys that had some upside with Wood and who I was not targeting, quite honestly, when he came to me. I just thought that was a good spot to take him. So I like the idea of having Wood and Green and Crow Armstrong. I feel like outfield is not as weak for me, although the back end of it is not as strong as I would have liked. I agree with you that taking Benintendi there was probably a little bit of a mistake.
All right, I'm going to beat you up a little bit more, give you a couple quick hitters, and then pass it over to Dave for a little injury risk assessment. All right, so Griffin Jacks. I didn't understand the point of taking. First of all, I don't understand in general why, Nathan, you and I had talked about this, why Griffin Jacks is going so high in drafts. He's a handcuff, right? And I think maybe in a draft and hold, I can maybe see it. But in a fab league where you took two closers, right? Like getting a third relief pitcher, like there are going to be guys that become available in fab, right? So like using that pick on an upside pitcher or, you know, just something that could be more useful, I think. Like I would have done that instead of taking Griffin Jacks there. Because I really think like if nothing happens to Joan Duran these first couple weeks, like you're dropping him. There's no point in holding Jacks, you know, once Fab rolls around. So that was one issue I had. The other thing, man, you're pitching. So no, your pitching up top is good, but you took a double whammy of old when you went Justin Verlander and Charlie Morton. Bro, those two pitchers are combined 84 years old. I don't know if like maybe you're feeling like I don't know, insecure about your age and you needed to get like other old men on your team to make you feel better about that.
Right.
I feel like that, you know, I'm a therapist, so I know these things. I know how the mind works, right? So yeah, your pitching staff a little bit old. You have Wheeler, you have Cole. Like in general, it's you got some old dudes on there. So you also took Trevor Williams. Okay, I don't have much to say there. I do apologize for this one though. I had encouraged you to take Brian Bayo. I don't remember what round this was in. It felt like it was pretty late.
It was late.
It was late, and I felt like it was way past ADP, but there was a reason for that. So I'm going to pass that over to Dave and tell us a little bit about the latest on Brian Bayo.
Yeah, it's a pretty worrisome injury, only because like he's got a history of really starting slowly and getting injured out of the gate. For him right now, he's got shoulder soreness. It's early in the spring, but then he was essentially shut down for almost 10 days, to the point where he could just throw up to 90 feet. He is expected to be ready, and by the time this is released, he should have thrown a bullpen. He's planning on doing that on Friday. But overall, I do worry about him and his off seasons. 2022, he suffered a groin injury right after his debut. March 2023, elbow inflammation, and 2024 in April, he had a lat muscle injury. So as good as he could eventually be, I just wonder what his training regimen is. So it's a worrisome injury in that we're seeing the same thing over and over again right out of the gate.
All right. Looking at Mike's team as a whole, what would you give it? Give it a letter grade for overall injury risk, and give us your rationale for that.
For injury risk, I would give him a B-, but it's contingent on Devers. He played with it last year. He played with those shoulders, and the offseason, it was supposed to fix this problem, but it is still on a modified workload. That's not a good sign. But he did still produce with it throughout the year up until about the last month of the season when they were pretty much out of it. So if he can come back healthy somehow and just, the bat speed is up there, the injury assessment goes up to maybe about a B+. But I'm just worried about the pitching injuries. I don't know if there's enough injuries. We're relying on Rasmussen with 2 Tommy Johns and an internal brace. Strider's out for a month. Bello, who we just spoke about. Verlander and Morton, they're old. Dustin May hasn't pitched in years. And even Luis Rengifo, I do worry about him as well. But I think if Devers comes back, and like I said, the bat speed, I think it can be a solid B.
All right. Very good. Let's move on to Nathan's Slarf draft. And I'll ask you the same question I asked Mike at the beginning. Which pick did you have in this draft, and what was your overarching strategy heading into it?
Yeah, so I had picked 12, and I didn't really have a strategy. I knew that it had to differ a little bit from the drafts that I've been doing that are DCs that are, you draft and hold format. And so I knew that, maybe push down closers a little bit more than I have been. And obviously, once I fill my starting spots, I wanted to shoot for upside in the later rounds. But having done kind of the opposite end of Mike, having that being his first real draft, I've done like a dozen maybe so far. So I've got a pretty good, I feel like, idea of all of these spots that I could find myself in. So I wanted to go in being flexible and taking advantage of what the draft gave me. And I tried to do that as best I could, but obviously there are some problems.
All right. We're going to get to those problems, but first we are going to take a quick commercial break. All right. Let's talk problems. First thing that really stuck out to me about your draft, Nathan, and I know you're aware of this, but you're really light on power, in my opinion. So when I'm trying to get an understanding of like while you're in the draft, at what point did it come to you? You're like, oh crap! Like I see the Aranda pick, the Peterson pick. Was that like a reaction to like I need to catch up on power? When did that come across your mind that you needed to address that issue?
By at a certain point, I did realize that that I was light. I mean, certainly by the time I'm taking Jacob Young as a starter, I know that I'm in bad shape. But honestly, it was probably even maybe like around the Jake Berger pick in the 8th round that I realized that I might be in trouble just with the way that the shaping up. But then, I look at this and I took Dylan Cruz and Josh Lowe back to back, so I wasn't too concerned about it, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I at a certain point for sure I was like, okay, this team is way light. And I don't think that Aranda, I mean, you and I mean, Jock is our guy, is our basically like our spirit animal.
Yes.
So that was not a reaction to anything except just loving Jock. But then and Aranda too was just I thought it was a nice, I needed a corner, and that was an okay pick. So no, I don't think I made any sort of reactionary picks or panicked at all. But yeah, when you look at it as a whole, it's definitely got some work to do.
All right. So I'm just going to go through it so the listeners have context. So, I mean, you started off fine, right? You went Lindor, Harper. You went, and then next 2 rounds went to Grom, Snell, which we'll get to in a moment. Let's see. You went Butler, Berger. So the power at that point, I think, is fine. But I think one of the things with these 15 teamers, you can get kind of stuck with getting catchers that really aren't going to give you much in terms of power. And I think that was part of your problem here. So after Berger, the next hitter you went was Cruz, who's probably more of like a 15 home run guy. Josh Lowe, Pena, Kybert Ruiz. Let's see. Willie Castro, Kirk, Jacob Young. So like that group right there, I feel like kind of that sets you back in that area.
That's for sure.
And then so you went Aranda, Peterson, then you went Brian Hayes. I want to ask you about that. What was the thought process there in taking Hayes at that point?
I mean, at that point, I was into the reserves, or maybe I was on the I think I was into the reserves, or at least I was on the edge of the reserves, and so I'm going to take a shot on a guy who we all liked a couple of years ago, even coming into last year. So I mean, it's certainly obviously his. I think if we're trying to like dream on him, his power is even like 15 to 18 to 20. So it's not like I was expecting much, but I mean, if I can snag what we do dream about, the like kind of 15 to 70 or whatever, then, that was a fine gamble to take there. That was all that thinking was.
Okay. The next one that I'm really scratching my head about is Spencer Horwitz after that, or a couple rounds after that. So we know, Dave, actually, do you know, do we have an update on Horwitz when we could expect to see him back?
It was originally 6 weeks, but he was just recently on the field swinging a bat.
Okay.
So just some dry swings. But other than that, it's still pretty much on schedule for the first of the month of the season.
So my question to you, Nathan, is if Spencer Horwitz starts the season on the IL, like, is he someone that you're going to be keeping? Like holding on to, or what do you think? Like what would the plan be there?
So this is one of the things you ask about the strategy going in. I mean, one of the things that I did recognize and have known from doing this in the past is that Dave McDonald wants these done pretty early in the draft season in terms, as far as fab leagues go. And so it's mid-February. I've got 5 weeks before opening day. And so I don't know what could transpire in those 5 weeks. And so I think there's a non-zero chance that Horowitz is ready to go on opening day. And if not, maybe it's shortly thereafter. And I think that the thinking is he's got first base, second base. You and I have talked about Horowitz. We like what he can do when he's healthy. And so it's take him here on February, 20th or whatever, and then see where he's at on, at the end of March, and make a decision then on whether or not I want to cut him loose or whatever. But, it was a reserve round pick. I didn't really think I was giving up a lot of opportunity costs to take a guy who was going a few rounds earlier than that when we thought he was going to be healthy.
All right. I'll take it. Mike, give me your thought on, he took, so his closers are Ryan Walker and Tanner Scott. So I want to focus on Tanner Scott for a second, because there's some debate out there. Obviously nobody knows.
Sure.
But there's some debate on the Dodgers bullpen as far as whether it's going to be Yates or Scott, or, a mix of both. What's your take on that situation?
It's a tough call. I mean, I think Scott is an unbelievably talented pitcher. I mean, he's been around a long time, really good lefty, high power, high velocity. Dave Roberts did come out and say that he expected that Tanner Scott was going to get the bulk of the chances, at least to start the season. They do have, they've got Kirby Yates, they've got Blake Trinan, they've got Kopech, who was hurt. They've got Evan Phillips, who's laying around in the weeds as well. I mean, Scott is clearly the best pitcher of that bunch. I know a lot of people like Yates. I do think that Tanner Scott's probably going to get somewhere between 65 and 75% of those save chances. So I would anticipate that he'd have over 20. They're paying him a lot of money to come in there and close. But we also know that Dave Roberts has a tendency to like to mix and match a little bit based on where things are. So you could have situations where Scott comes in the seventh if there's a couple lefties coming up. But I do really like Tanner Scott a lot as a pitcher. I think it's a little bit unknown as to what his save situation is going to be. Ironically, Ryan Walker is kind of in the same boat, although I think he's going to close to start the season for San Francisco. But he's a guy that can cover a lot of different roles, as we've talked about on the pod before. I think he's going to close as well there. Camilo Doval does lurk, but he hasn't been able to throw a strike since Hillary Clinton was running for president, I think. So it's been a while. Long story short, I think that he's good at closer. I like what he did there.
All right, very good. Let me kick it over to Dave because I have to ask about, which personally I know we're supposed to be negative, but I love the DeGrom Snell combo up top. I have a draft where I did the same thing. And you and I, Dave, have gone back and forth throughout the offseason about DeGrom and how we feel about him. So not only did he go with the risk of DeGrom, but added to that risk, maybe a little less risk, but still one that many are kind of afraid to take in Blake Snell. So tell me about your thought. Give me your thoughts on that combo and overall the risk assessment for Nathan's team.
Yeah, for those two, I am worried. Obviously, DeGrom. I don't know. I still don't know how many innings we're going to get. But something interesting that I noticed this week was I want to keep an eye on his velo because he had a big uptick in velocity. I think it was 2021 when he started pitching harder and the spin rates were faster. And it was there that he just started to get injured more and more often. So there's a chance that maybe that lower velocity back in September was purposeful. I don't know. I don't know if he's changing anything or not. This is just pure speculation on my part. But I want to see what his velocity is like. I think if he actually slows it down a bit more like he did, he would have a chance to be stretched out. As for Blake Snell, I do worry about him just a little bit because I noticed that in his injury history, where do I have it here? I have it where it's a lot of, there it is. Sorry. Since 2021, he's got 6 IL placements, but they're all for lower body injuries. It's gastroenteritis, a couple of abductor, some groin, and some illnesses. I don't know if there's something going on in that area that he's not sharing or what, but it's always in that area. I don't know if that's something in line for something bigger to happen. So overall, this is more risk than I'm willing to take to start with pitching. But overall, I would still give this a B for an injury assessment. We talked about DeGrom, talked about Snell. Rasmussen we talked about before, but it was pretty solid nonetheless. And really, it's only a B because all of the concerns that I have are with pitching.
Got it. All right. So I'll be honest, for both of your drafts, and Mike, the one that you did, like obviously I was very involved with, so I should like it. But overall, both of your drafts I really do like. Nathan, I think your pitching is just lights out.
Yeah, I love his pitching too.
And I think maybe I was being a little harsh with the power thing. Now that I'm like really like looking at it, you'd probably be fine. Just need to maybe hit. You took Gerard Encarnacion as your last pick, which I really like. He's kind of a sleeper, I think, has multiple paths to playing time and has massive power. So that's a little like something for the listeners, a guy to target at the end of your drafts. But yeah, overall, I think you guys both did did a pretty good job there.
Isn't
And
it just
I tried to be negative
fascinating?
as long as I could. What's
Isn't
that?
it just fascinating to look at other people that you know and respect what they do and what their thought process is? I just find that part of this whole thing really enlightening and just incredibly like empowering, like I really enjoy the give and take that we have with that stuff. And I'm a big boy, literally and figuratively. It can take a lot of criticism, as Nathan pointed out in his roast. Thank you, Nathan. It's the best thing anybody said about me in weeks. But I just love the idea that we can sit in a room and talk about that stuff and spitball it and look at it and say, wow, like Nathan liked Spencer Horowitz. I did too. Chris, you hate him. So you pointed out in the drafts over the weekend, like, no, don't do that. Well, now he's going to be back. And I'm like kind of kicking myself because he's got the first base and second base eligibility. And I think he's actually going to play a lot in Pittsburgh. So I just find it fascinating that we can all do that. Like, what a great thing that brings a bunch of disparate personalities together, right?
Love it. Yeah, and that's why I kind of wanted this format. I don't hear something like this too often. So like to kind of look at things, our teams critically through this critical lens and kind of pick it apart and understand the thought process behind the decisions, I think is helpful for the listeners as well as for us. So good stuff there. We're gonna move on to our what's up?
Can I like interject just really quickly too?
Absolutely.
It's like this, if we're trying to be sort of informational and help people with their drafts, is that one thing that I did a sort of takeaway from this Slarf draft is that it did go like I kind of said this in the tweet that I sent out when I sent out my draft board, is that it went kind of sideways where catchers did start flying off the board. Wilson Contreras went at like 65, and that really threw me off. And so there were points where I was unwilling to compromise and sort of go off of what I thought was value. So I ended up, you talked about my pitching staff. I ended up really like, I love my pitching staff as well, but that's because I was sort of unwilling to take other guys that I didn't like. And so I think that's there. You're going to end up with holes, but you're also going to end up with things that you like if you remain flexible. And then the other takeaway, I think, too, is that, it is sort of great, like Mike was talking about, that we all have different opinions on this stuff, but it's also great that every draft is kind of its own animal. And that, that you could, because someone else is a human being and not a robot making a pick, Wilson Contreras can go off the board and kind of like throw a wrench into everything. And so you end up with a team that looks different than maybe like you thought it would, but you kind of adjust on the fly. So yeah, I think there's something to be said for staying flexible and not compromising on your beliefs as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's tough to strike that balance, right? Like you have to be able to take a detour, but at the same time not make decisions that are against, that are totally against what you had, your thoughts going in. So yeah, it's a fine, and I think the best players kind of are able to strike that balance. This was fun, and this game is fun. I just love talking through this stuff. So we are going to transition to our listener questions. So we've gotten a couple over the past few weeks here, and we did one last week, and we'll do another one this week. And this one we actually have a female listener. So this is Lena. Her question is, hello, nice to meet you. I am from Singapore and I am 39 years old.
Perfect.
I'm looking for a long-term relationship.
I'm in.
I hope to find, well, yeah, you're really going to be in. I hope to find a mature man who is older than me.
Yeah, for sure. I'm in.
So
I'm way older.
I sent her your number.
Sweet.
I also, I didn't know, like there wasn't a specific baseball question, but I did actually put it out there that, first of all, like if you're looking for something long-term, I don't know if this is a dynasty format or what, but I recommended, just like you, Justin Verlander and Charlie Morton for pitchers. So no response yet, but we'll see. But I'll give you, she might be reaching out to you for help with that as well as help with other things. So
can I fly to Singapore from Tout Wars in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, sure.
Direct. Do it. I'm in. Direct.
Yeah.
Direct.
I'll be seeing you there, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'll be there on Sunday. So
I don't. Well,
you'll
I
be
don't know.
around.
I might avoid you. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah, smart. Yeah. All right, but this is actually a real question. Real question. And I thought it was an interesting one. So this is from Steve S.J. Venker. He asked, "Do you think it's a bad idea to have multiple players on the same team, specifically Austin Riley, Matt Olson, and Marcelo Zuna? I have faith that the Braves can match this year, but it still feels risky." So I want to throw this question out in terms of like stacking a team, stacking an offense. Nathan, I'm going to start with you. What are your thoughts on this as a potential strategy?
I don't see the risk in it. I guess, I mean, there are going to be games where your team gets shut out. The MLB team gets shut out. And so then, of course, all your guys are going to have bad days. But that can happen when you've got guys spread across teams as well. So I think that there's legit like upside in multiple guys who will be hitting around. It's kind of the DFS idea, right? Like that's the big DFS thing, is like stacking and guys who could all correlate. And so in the same way, I mean, if you've got three players in a good offense who are all going to be knocking each other in and all that, I don't see the upside outweighs the downside, as long as it's, you don't want three Marlins, but if you have three Braves or you have three Yankees or whatever, like I think that plays. I think that's not only is that not scary, I think that if you can do it reasonably within ADP or within some sort of auction cost, then that's could be a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think the cost matters too, right? Like if you're going for guys like, all up top, let's say with Riley, Ozuna, and Olson, like those guys are all in the top 5 rounds. So I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily, but I don't know how much you're already paying the cost, right, of having those guys. So I don't know how much profit you're going to make from that strategy. Like you need those guys to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe like it may be more beneficial to target a team that's kind of like say the Diamondbacks last year. They were kind of expected to be middle of the road, but they ended up really, exceeding expectations. So that's just an example. Like if you're really in on several guys from a team and all those guys are not super expensive, then I think if all of those guys hit, then I think you could really reap the rewards, because think of the extra counting stats that you're getting from all of those guys hitting, kind of like that DFS angle. But I actually did this kind of unintentionally at first, and then I kind of leaned into it a little bit more. We didn't get to my my CLQ draft, but just pulling it up here, and it ended up being Braves. I ended up taking, so I have Sean Murphy, Ozuna, Harris, Profar, and then I ended up backing them up later. I took Drake Baldwin and Brian Dela Cruz. So I have like a nasty Brave stack. So we'll see. I mean, again, it wasn't really, kind of just ended up that way. Once I got to Profar, that kind of, just the fact that I had the other Braves, that was a tiebreaker for me with Profar in that spot, because I'm like, all right, I'm probably gonna get the leadoff hitter or 2-hole hitter on this team. So, but yeah, definitely don't think it's too risky of a strategy. So, all right, we will leave it there. Thank you for the question, Steve. Please send more questions in to our Twitter handle, and we'll at least answer them and maybe read them on the show. We're going to transition to our final segment, our mental health minute. And for anybody who's new to the show, this is where we talk about non-baseball stuff, and specifically we talk about things that we are doing to maintain our overall wellness. So let's start with our guest, Nathan. What are you doing these days to keep your head on straight?
So, like I mentioned last time I was on, I talked about talk therapy and kind of the mental aspect of it. This time, it just so happens that it's actually the physical sort of side that I'm excited about. I tweeted out yesterday a picture of some hockey gear that I just bought, and I played roller hockey coming up until about the early years of high school. and just got away from it. I mean, you know, it's just a thing that. And so a couple years ago, I told my wife that I wanted rollerblades again, so she bought me rollerblades. And then here recently, I found a local league that actually is like a fairly professional or run organization, and reached out to them, and so got my name on the list. And so I've been going about buying all this equipment, and I'm excited to kind of get back in and actually like start moving my body again. I one of the things that I worked on in therapy is trying to have more interests, because you can really like lose yourself as a parent. You just sort of become someone's dad, and you don't really have your own hobbies and interests anymore. And so I'm really trying to focus on finding some things that are just for me. And roller hockey is hopefully going to be one of them here soon.
Awesome, man.
Nice.
Thank you for sharing that. Mike, what about you?
You know, I'm going to take a little different tactic this week. Excuse me. I really think, Chris, in going back, this is pre-Dave days when we were hosting the podcast together, and we had Nathan
Halcyon
on.
days.
Yeah, the Halcyon days. When we had Nathan on the first time, I really do. I was thinking about this a lot this week when we knew that Nathan was coming on with us, that I really think the nexus of our mental health minute was really having him on and his vulnerability and talking about going to therapy. Guys don't talk about stuff like that. We know that guys historically don't talk about mental health and how those things are impacting them. And I just want to give a shout out to Nathan for that, because I think if we go back to the thought process of that, the nexus of that, I think really starts with him being on the show. And then us realizing, wait a minute, we're both mental health professionals. Maybe that's something that we can add into the show. And maybe that's something important that somebody gets out of it. And you and I both have had messages from people that listen to the show that have messaged us directly on, Twitter, whatever they call that, direct messaging, X, I don't even know anymore, but reach out to us and say, boy, what you guys were talking about with the mental health minute was really something that resonated with me. Or people who've reached out to me and have asked for resources on where to get help. I mean, that's probably more powerful than anything else that we do. And so I really want to shout out Nathan for that, because I really do think that him being on and what he did there and being courageous the way that he was really kind of started a trend for us with this show.
That's awesome, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Good stuff. Dave, haven't heard from you in a bit. Give me your what you're doing to maintain your wellness.
Well, for me, I don't know about you guys, but I can be ultra competitive. I don't know about you guys, but there are moments where I've noticed in the past with some of my leagues where you have a bad day, and you have a bad day mentally because your team just crap the bed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to understand that it's a long season. But last season, I'm in a competitive league with a lot of my friends, and we just want to beat each other, right? And I usually do pretty well, knock on wood. But I ended up actually quitting the league because I realized how much it actually affected me. There were days where, someone made a trade that was just ridiculous, and in my opinion, and then I'm like, why'd you do that? And I'm angry here at home, and I'm doing a lot of things. So I'm actually back in that league, and that's not my therapy. But what it is I've made a note of how I've felt in the past, and I'm doing more of a conscious effort to just relax, take it easy, and realize A, it's not the end of the world. B, it shouldn't actually ruin my day if, someone goes 0 for 4, and C, just try and have fun with it. So that's my mental health this season. I'm going to try and be less ultra competitive and more enjoy fantasy baseball for the reason why we started in the first place.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right. Lastly, for me, I listen to too many podcasts, probably. One podcast that I enjoy, I don't listen to all the time. I'm not like a Huberman bro, so to speak, but I like Andrew Huberman. I think there's some good stuff that he shares. I was listening to a podcast today that I'd already been, because the weather is getting better, I've been trying to be more conscious of this, but he had someone on today that was talking about the importance of sunlight exposure. And it's such a simple concept, right? Like I think we've yeah, they were talking about this, how there's been kind of like an anti, like, oh, the sun could cause cancer. Like, you really got to be careful. And people, as a result, have kind of shied away from getting probably the amount of sun that they need. And it's honestly, it's not even that much. Like this guy was sharing that's really like 15, 20 to 20 minutes per day of a direct sunlight exposure is kind of all your body needs. And this was based on a lot of research and everything. So, it does wonders for your physical health. He talked about how it's restorative for your mitochondria, and that's really, like if you remember from high school science, right? Those are like that's like where the energy storage of our body, right? Like those need to be in good shape. So he talked about how sunlight was restorative for your mitochondria, and everything flows from that. Like your mood is better, your risk for certain diseases goes down. So it really, like, it's a 3-hour long podcast, which it felt like was kind of unnecessary. It really, the main takeaway I have from it is get outside in the sun, and I think that's just an important thing to remember. Just getting fresh air, can do, just that very simple thing could do wonders for you. So that's my mental health minute. We are going to leave it there. Nathan, thank you so much for coming on. This was a blast. If you could tell our listeners where they could find you on social media, and where they find your work, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm writing for Baseball Prospectus. We're in the throes of the position previews, and going to be done with that next week with starting pitchers. So I'm writing a couple things a week there on the deep league DC type stuff that you and I enjoy. It's real sicko stuff. And on Twitter Twitter at Brotisserie, Rotisserie with a B in front of it, because bro has unironically become one of my favorite words. So
yeah. All right, man. Well, thanks again. We will be back next week. We've got Matthew Leach talking Minnesota Twins, so that should be fun. We'll probably talk a little bit more about the spring training stuff and some of the big storylines from that and things you need to know for your drafts. So we will catch you next week. We thank you so much for listening. For Dave Funnel, for Mike Carter, I'm Chris Torres. Thank you so much for listening to the Fantasy Baseball Beat.